In today's lesson, we're going to look at Delphi and databases. In grade 11 in the CAP syllabus, we would have dealt with connecting to a database via Delphi, and we would have mainly worked with one table. But now in grade 12, we tend to work with multiple tables, and especially when those tables are linked, there's a whole new dynamic to have a look at. So we're going to look particularly today at adding a record, and what does it mean when you add a record to a table that is linked to another table. Now, first of all, you need to understand that there are two types of tables when you have a linked connection between two tables. You have the parent table, in this case the activity table, and the child table, which is the learner table. And the way you can determine which one's which is the child table has a foreign key from the other table. So over here we've got the list of details of the activity, how much it costs, what its name is. Now instead of keeping all this data inside the learner table, we just keep the activity name, and that's the link between the data. So if I ever wanted the information from the learners and also the activity and the activity's cost, I would use this link to get the cost or the duration of the activity. So this is a way to make sure that we don't duplicate data, and that when we delete stuff, it doesn't delete everything. There are lots of reasons why we have foreign keys, and you tend to learn about that when you do normalizing a database. But over here we've got our learner table, which has the details of the learner, and there is a foreign key which tells me which activity this learner takes, and that detail comes from the activity table. Activity table will have a list of the activities available. So when we add, we're going to add to the learner table. Adding an activity is very easy. It's just straightforward because there's nothing in the activity table that is dependent on the learner. But in this case, the learner table has a field which is dependent on the activity table. So in this case, there's some steps that we need to ensure. And when we do that, just some extra steps that you need to be aware of. Always ensure that when you insert in a primary key, that it is a unique primary key. That is the beauty of using Delphi to connect to a database or any programming language, is that when you are inserting a record in a database via a program, you can do some error checking or code that can prevent inserting a record unless that primary key is unique. The other things that you can do is you can validate the data, and in that we use defensive programming, either using special components like spin edit controls or combo boxes or list boxes to ensure that the user can only put in the correct data, or we can write code that will catch the error. So the moment the user puts information that is not correct, we can send a message, so we will not insert the record until everything is 100% correct. Another thing to be sure of, over here, for example, the learner has an activity which is based on the activity table. We need to make sure that that activity is in the activity table. So let's have a look at this scenario. We're going to insert a learner into the learner table, and we've got all the details, and there you can see the activity names. We also have a table here showing us all the details of the activity along with their cost and their price and their permission type. So we've got all that information here. So we're going to fill in the details in these edit boxes, and then we are going to add a learner. Before I click on the add learner button, just to be sure that we've got our module over here with the connection to the database, and then we've got our tables, ADO tables, and then we've got our data sources, which are obviously connected to these two DB grids. So there we go. This is all under a form or unit there called DM excursion. So if we want to access these components, we have to use DM excursion.tbl activity, for example. As long as when I click on this add button, as long as we've added the unit at the top there, which we've got over there. So on this button, we're obviously going to be doing a lot with the table or working with the DM module. So we're going to use a with clause DM, and we are going to use the DM excursion variable there. Do. And it's probably a good idea because we're going to be doing many things. We're going to have a begin and end. So this, just to make sure, is the end of the with. Okay. The first step, if you remember correctly, was to make sure that the primary key is unique. So what I'm going to do before I extract all these details, let's go to the form. Before I extract all these details, I'm first going to extract the learner ID, which is from EDT learner ID. I'm first going to extract that and check that it is unique. Okay, so let's go add unit. So I'm gonna get a variable for that. So variable S, let's call it learner ID, and it's of type string. string. And as long as we know what the data is in our database, our learner string should be text, or the primary key is of text format. So I'm going to extract sLearner. sLearner ID is equal to whatever's in TBL, and we are getting it from the learner table. Well, not the learner table, incorrect. We're getting it from that edit box, which is edt learner ID.text. So there we go. I get it from the learner. Now, before I continue anything, I need to check that that learner isn't currently in the database already, because if it is, then I can't add the record with that learner ID. So in this case, I'm going to use the locate function. So if tbl learner dot locate. Now, what are we trying to locate? We're trying to which field are we trying to locate? We are trying to look for in the learner ID field. Okay, and you can double check that by looking at the form. There, it's learner ID. And we are looking in the learner ID. What are we looking for? We're looking for our learner ID, which we get from the edit box. And then the last two, we're just going to put these two over there, so it should work. Now, if it locates it, then this would be true. This will be true. So there, whatever happens after it means that it does exist already in the database table. So I'll just say end of if. So what do I want it to do if there is a learner ID? Well, I want to obviously show a message saying, hey, don't do this. You can say learner ID already exists. Give them a nice message. Just always be polite, because we don't want to insult our learners. Obviously, you can customize that message. You could also use a message DLG, and let's just exit out of it now, because we don't want to do anything else after this. Exit. So we'll display the message and exit. If it doesn't locate it, then it will obviously jump out of the if statement and come to this part of the code. So we can do whatever we want here. We don't need an else. We could put it in if we want, but because of that exit, we don't need to worry about that. So now we are going to insert. So we're going to go into insert mode. So we are inserting in the learner database dot insert. So we put the database table into insert mode so that it knows that we want to insert the table. And now I'm going to put in the learner details for TBL learner ID must get. Now there's two places I can get. I can get it either from the edit box, or I can get it from the string which I've already declared. I'm going to make it easy for myself and just use that string that I've already got. So that's the first one. The other field, TBL learner, and we are going to get, now you can always double check this if you go to the form, we want surname, and it's going to get it from the edt surname text box or edit control. So it's going to be surname. And that field is also string, so it's going to get it from edt surname.text. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do all the other fields, and then we'll modify it later just to save time here. There you go. You can see I've added all the fields for the surname, the name, the register class, the contact number, the emergency contact, and the amount paid. The only thing to take note of here is that all of these fields are of type string, so I can get them directly from the edit boxes controls, the text property. But the amount paid, although I'm getting it from the text field of the EDT paid, I must remember that the amount paid in the database is stored as a number, or particularly a currency, so we need to use string to float, so we can convert it from a string to a float to put in there. Obviously, you could write special code over here to check that the user has input correct data, or that there's no blanks in the fields that they've inputted. You could obviously do that defensive program here. Just for time's sake, not going to do that. The only thing that I haven't done is the activity. Now this, if you remember correctly, the learner table, there is an activity. If we go to our form, if I go right to the end, let's scroll this way, there's an activity name. Now that's the part we've just got to be a little bit careful of. So we've got activity name. Now where are we going to get this from? Well, to make sure that the user always inserts an activity that is already in the activity table, we are going to use this little table DB grid over here to make sure that the user selects one of them that is only selected. Now obviously depending on your scenario, depends on what you want to do. In our case, you can see all the details from the activity table, so you've got more information about what is available. Maybe you don't want all the information, maybe you just want a list of activity names, and there are lots of ways of doing it. You could create a combo box, and when the form is loaded, that the combo box is populated with the data from the activity table, or we could just use a DB grid like it is at the moment. And what I'm going to do here, just to make it a little bit interesting, I'm going to go to my module and I'm going to go to the activity table. I'm going to double click on it and it shows me which of the fields are visible. Okay, so I'm actually going to delete some fields from here, and if I do that and I go back to my form, I'm going to close that. And let's go back to excursions. You see now we've just got the details of here. So now I can actually make my little thing here into like a makeshift combo box or list box here, that you can only see the activities. And when you select one, when your mouse is, or you select one, then obviously that will be the one that is selected in the TBL activity table. So when I add an activity name, I'm going to get it from the other activity. Let me see if I spelled it correctly, activity table, and I'm going to get that from the activity, which is also called activity name, from the activity table. I've said activity quite a few times there. Okay, so the learner activity name will be getting from whatever was selected from the TBL activity table, or the DB grid in that case. And once it's done, we can go TBL learner dot post, because we want to post those details. We want to flash them to the database so that the database knows that it must put the database data in there, and there we go. And it should then add the record to the database. So just recapping quickly, we first check to see that the user ID, or the primary key, the learner ID, sorry, is unique. If it's not unique, then we display a message and we exit straight away. If it isn't another learner ID that's the same, that means that the one that the user has given is unique, then we can go into insert mode. We add all the fields, remembering that the one foreign key we're going to get from the TBL activity table from what the user selects there. So let's test to see if it works. Let's run the program. No error so far, so let's input a ID number. Let's hopefully input a one that doesn't exist. I'm going to make a really old one just to make sure it doesn't exist. This is not mine, I'm not this old, but just so that we make sure there's our old ones, that no one in that table exists with that one. 081, there we go. Let's surname, let's put in Long, and my name Mr. Long. Register class, let's put it A. Contact number 041123456. Please don't phone this number, I don't think it exists. 08912345667. And amount paid, let's say we paid in 150 Rand, because that would never happen. And we can select which one we want. There's a whole list over here. Which activity do I want to get involved in? Oh, I've always wanted to be like the green arrow, so I'll say archery. So I've selected archery. We're going to add the learner. And there at the bottom, there's our details. Long Mr. and it's selected archery. Fantastic. Now we know that it works. For more videos in the grade RT CAP syllabus, as well as other grades for RT, as well as other stuff on CAT, anything like that, if you're interested in learning about it, come to our channel, have a look, see what you can learn from there, subscribe, tell us what you like, tell us what you don't like. We'd love to hear from you. Also follow us on Twitter so that you can keep up to date whenever we add new videos. The examples from today's video come from the e-notes that were created by Study Opportunities. They will be releasing a textbook in 2015, but their e-notes are available now in 2014. If your teacher is interested in getting them, then they can go to their website to get details. This is for the grade 12 CAPS RT syllabus.